Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon, and I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we look at the past 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our movie blind spots. Today, we're going almost all the way back to 1925 to talk about two movies you've heard of but you may not have seen. Let's talk about. There's definitely a hierarchy here. There's a prelim and a main event. So let's talk about the movie that you recommended for me, and that is the very first feature-length version of The Phantom of the Opera put to film. Why did you give me this movie?
Well, it was the only movie from 1925 that I had seen, so it was a very easy choice, of course. But also, I mean, it's The Phantom of the Opera. It's a very famous story. Obviously, it's stood up over time. I mean, they're still making movies about it. They're still adapting it in different ways. I mean, if you look up the list on Wikipedia of adaptations of The Phantom of the Opera, I mean, the list is a mile long. You know, they've done it on, like, Tom and Jerry and Alvin and the Chipmunks have done variations of adaptations of this story. So it's a very famous story that's been done a million times. And this is the original version, the original feature version. And I had very fond memories of seeing it. Traverse City Film Festival had played it a number of years ago. It was the first time I'd seen it, and it's on gigantic screen, sitting up in a balcony, had a live organ player playing on it, so I had some very fond memories of seeing it. And again, it was the only movie from 1925 I had seen, so that's why we revisited it.
How did it hold up for you?
Not as well, obviously. I mean, you're going to be missing something when you're not sitting in a gigantic theater, surrounded by people, sitting in a balcony, having a live organ player. But I think for a 1925 movie, there are certainly things that it does very well. I think the set designs in the movie, I think, are really, really good. I mean, they're so intricate. His layers and, all the different, like, traps that he has, that the Phantom has set and everything. Even just the design of the theater and, like, the outside and everything, I think, is really good. I even like the color palettes that they have, like, where it has that, like, blue color for when it's nighttime, and then that kind of yellowish color when they're doing daytime, and that, I kind of liked how that looked. Like that the costumes are all very good. Some of the crowd scenes are, like, really, like, kind of really, really well staged, like when they have the big sequence at the end when the chandelier falls and the crowd,
the chandelier happens pretty close to the beginning of the movie.
Is that in the beginning?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
It's before the Phantom's unmasked even.
I thought that was towards the end.
No, it's before he takes her to his lair, because the whole the plot of the movie is there is an opera, and some new people buy the opera, which ends up not being important at all, actually.
Right.
And but it's important in that they're the new people through whose eyes we see that there's a superstition about a phantom who lives in the opera. What? Hence the name of the movie.
More of the opera than in the opera.
Forgive me. And he's in love with the understudy of the opera, and so he intimidates the lead singer. Well, she's a singer, she's an opera singer. Mm-hmm. He intimidates her into not performing so that the woman he loves can perform, and it's stuff there that makes the chandelier fall. It's like getting the girl to understand that he's in control of the opera.
Interesting. For some reason, I had it in my mind that it was much later in the movie, but
it seems like it should be a climactic thing, but the climactic stuff is all like, this guy's going to drown in a trap. That's the climax.
Which, I thought that was, well done in its own right, too. But the chandelier scene with the big crowd, I thought was, kind of really well staged. And there's some of that's good. And I think, like, the makeup is, it's very 1920s, but it's still, it's pretty well done. I mean, he looked like a gross Phantom. And, Lon Chaney, I think, it's a good performance from Lon Chaney. So I think there's enough to like about this movie in the parlance of its time. But it's, I don't know if it's one I'd recommend for mass consumption.
Yeah, I didn't like it that much. So it's funny because a very well-known remake of it was made by Universal. I think this was also made by Universal, but Universal got the rights to this, and it became part of Universal Monsters series, the 1940s version. And this felt to me like Frankenstein, kind of, and Dracula for that matter. There's something evil. There's a girl in danger. Scary. I guess. The monster is creepy. I agree with everything you said about it that's positive. When they're up on the roof, and you see, like, the big spire and the gargoyles and all, and the phantoms hanging from the top. And we talked about this in last week's episode, but it's like, how do they do stuff like this? They just did it for real. Pretty cool. And it feels like it's real, right? He's really, I mean, I don't know if that's a real top of a building. It probably isn't. It's probably a set, but it's really 30 feet high, and there is a god. And so he's really, 20 feet above them. It's a pretty cool visual. Mm-hmm. I just thought the story was kind of dull. And look, what's it even about? So, like I said, he loves this girl. He makes sure that she's the star. He doesn't want her to see his face because he's all gross and disfigured. We never find out why, right? It's not even really an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever really discussed. It's just maybe there was this. I think maybe someone says there was like an accident or something a long time ago. But it's if anybody says anything, it's like one line maybe, and it's not really dwelled upon.
Right. So he's just some kind of ghoul.
Mm.
He's, run of the mill everyday ghoul,
Yeah.
and he loves her. And because he has gotten her to be the star of the show, he thinks that she'll just agree to love him. And she sort of says she will, and she sort of says she won't, but she loves this other guy. And she, in the least sneaky way possible, even though he tells her not to go to him, he's like, you can be free, but don't go to him. She immediately goes to him.
Yeah.
And so now the Phantom is mad and trying to just like kill as many people through trap in the opera as he. The traps are so funny. Why are there so many Rube Goldberg traps in the opera house? And that's the story. And then, it's because it's basically a Universal Monsters movie. It's about these heroic regular guys who come and save the girl. And then the town beats, spoiler alert for over 100-year-old movie, beats Phantom to death and throws him in the lake.
Throws him in the river. What do they call it? Seine?
Yeah.
The river Seine.
Yeah. It's because it's in Paris, right?
Yeah, it's in Paris. Yep. Yeah. I forgot how like brutal and violent that was too. I mean, yeah, they just beat the hell out of him and dump him in the river and then fade. Like that's the end of the movie.
That's the end of the movie. How do you have a Phantom of the Opera movie without the Phantom of the Opera anymore?
That's it. Did they do that to Gerard Butler in 2004?
So I've never seen any other film versions of this. I did. So this was, for a while, the longest running show ever on Broadway. And I finally went to see it in like 2018, right before it ended. I gotta tell you, I was bored out of my mind. I think I had a migraine when I was seeing it. And it's the same as this. Like some of the things they were able to do on the stage in a Broadway theater were very cool. You don't think like there's a chandelier that crashes every night. Sometimes on the weekends twice. The sound effects are very loud. It really did sound like they were shooting guns off in the theater. So it's cool, but I was really bored. And I was really bored even though I grew up listening to my dad listen to the soundtrack of this play all the time. So I knew all the words to every song. And I was still like, I wish I was just in my dad's car listening to this and not sitting in a stuffy theater.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I should say, I remember that I saw it. I was really young. We took a family trip to Toronto. I was probably maybe like 10 or something when I saw it. So, I mean, I know that I saw it, but I don't have a lot of memory of seeing it. But, I saw it. I saw Phantom,
Softly, gently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else is there to say about it? Yeah, Lon Chaney was good for what he was asked to do. I thought everyone else was kind of hammy. It's interesting you mentioned the color grading. I'm curious. Well, first, I have two questions. One, was that the color grading that you saw when you saw it in the theater?
I believe it was, yes. But again, it was 11 years ago that I saw it in the theater, so my memory could be a little hazy.
And then number two, do you think they did that when it was first released, or was it all just in black and white?
I think that was actually on release. I'd have to research that to know for sure, but I think they did that on purpose just to create that different sense of time and place.
I thought that was done really well in The Thief of Baghdad, which we've reviewed for this show. In this one, because it all takes place in the opera house, or so much of it takes place in the opera house, it does work. Like, his layer is green. Ooh, gross. It's just like, it's less interesting when you're not like underwater and in the air and in a mountain and in a palace. I just like Thief of Baghdad a lot more than I like this.
It's just cool to see them trying different things with like, okay, I mean, we're limited by black and white film, kind of what can we do? It's kind of cool to see people even back then, really kind of trying to push the limits and push the boundaries of, what they were able to do. And, I dig that.
Yeah. Well, as far as monster movies go, I did like it more than Nosferatu, even though I think in general it's less highly regarded than Nosferatu.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Right. But not as much as, some of the other classic 20 films we've reviewed.
Have you watched The Invisible Man yet? Did you ever watch the original one of those?
No, I got to get to that.
Probably the best one.
Yeah, I'll check that out at some point. And maybe after we finish our 100 years of filling in our movie blind spots. Okay, but then I gave you The Gold Rush.
Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome. It's very good.
It is.
So I watched this for the first time during the pandemic, and I thought, holy crap, how did they do any of this? Like, beyond the stunts. So this movie is about, there's really two prospectors. One has already farmed gold, and the other one is the tramp. And they wind up stuck in a cabin with a thief, I guess you could call it. He's like a robber baron type. Not a robber baron, that's a baron. This is a thief. So there's that chunk. Then there's the chunk where the tramp falls in love and gets stood up on New Year's. And then there's crazy stuff happens with a cabin blowing in the wind. That's pretty much the whole movie. And at every turn, it's hilarious and, again, like mind-bending, the special effects that over 100 years later, or almost 100 years later, you're just thinking, I mean, I know how they would do it now, miniatures. How'd they do it then? Probably miniatures. but still pretty incredible. So yeah, you said thank you. Tell me what you thought of it.
I mean, I feel like maybe I had seen this at some point, but, it had to have been pre-Letterboxd era or whatever. So, I mean, it had been long enough ago where I felt like a lot of this felt new. And again, I was laughing out loud. I was watching it as my wife got home from work, kind of late at night, and I'm watching it, and it's a short movie. So, like, I'm watching it, and she gets home from work, and she's, making herself a late dinner and whatever. She's like, she don't want to talk, whatever yet. So she's just got her earphones in. She's watching Mad Men on her phone, like doing her own thing. And I am laughing so hard. She's looking over me like what is he watching? Like laughing at these old gags. Like there's so many funny little things there. Like the chicken suit thing was like, this is so out, like just like so out of left field there. And then doing the thing with the shoe, and he does the little dance with he does the little potato dance that
I think they're bread rolls, but
yeah, the rolls.
What
whatever
difference does it make? Yeah.
Whatever it is, like he does the little dance that Grandpa Simpson would rip off later. And there's another amazing sequence he does later where he's finally dancing with this girl that he's in love with, and he ends up roping a dog into the dance with him, and then the dog is doing is in the middle of this dance. There's so many like amazing little sequences in it, and then gosh, when they get up and when they're in the house and the house is teetering off the side of the cliff. I mean, these things they all look incredible, and every time when they're in the middle of a storm and they open the door and the wind is blows them across the across the cabin. I mean, I'm laughing out loud at a lot of it, and it's amazing how well this stuff we've talked about a lot. Basically every time we talk about silent movies back from this era on the podcast, but just the comedies from this era hold up so well. The Chaplin and the Buster Keaton and the Harold Lloyd stuff. It holds up so well, and it's still so funny to watch today.
So I agree with all of that, obviously. I mean, I don't really even know that much more to add, except let's tie it back to Phantom of the Opera. You mentioned that Tom and Jerry did a version of Phantom of the Opera. Tom and Jerry also like ripped off the smelling this aroma and picturing a chicken, and then so did every cartoon ever. That's a great special effect. Another great special effect is eating the shoe. Mm-hmm. Apparently they made it out of black licorice.
Yeah.
Simple.
Amazing.
I can't get over the cabin, though. The cabin blowing and going off the cliff. It looks real.
Yeah. It looks unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, still, to this day.
Have you seen Hundreds of Beavers?
No, not yet, but it's on my list.
I'm so upset you haven't seen it. That would be such a great thing to talk about. And now, granted, I already did my Hundreds of Beavers review, which came out in our 2024 summer movie episode, is available on YouTube, even though no one watched it on there. So that exists if you want to hear me talk about Hundreds of Beavers. But it would be so much fun to talk about it in connection to this movie, because it owes so much. Like every character from Hundreds of Beavers is an analog to a character in the Gold Rush.
Mm-hmm. Well, even Seinfeld did a chicken thing in the last season. They had a thing where Kramer was doing the butter shave thing, and then Newman saw him as like a big chicken.
That's the final season. Dang.
Yeah, that's season 9. My wife just finished it again for like the second or third time. So
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Where does this rank in terms of other Chaplin movies for you?
Well, for me, where was it? I only have 3 marked on Letterboxd. Was it 3 or 2?
Well, we've covered 3 on this podcast, so I hope it's 3.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, because what was it? It was Modern Times and
Great Dictator
and Gold Rush. This would probably be number 2. I think Modern Times would still be my favorite of the 3, and then this one, and then Great Dictator. Although I love all 3 of them a lot, so it's hard to... I think Modern Times would be a solid number 1, and then Gold Rush and Great Dictator would be 2 and 3. Tough to choose, but I think this one would be number 2, just because I laughed like so much in almost every single scene. Like there was something like really like laugh out loud funny at.
So those are the same 3 I've seen. I've only seen the ones we've done on this podcast. I wonder if City Lights, because it's so famous, would make the cut. But it's so cool that we've seen for this podcast 3 different Chaplin movies from 3 different decades, and all chronicling sort of his transition through his career, because this is the pure peak tramp silent film. Then you've got Modern Times, where he's finally deciding like, okay, I'll do some sound here. It's a sound movie, but it has very little dialogue. Mm-hmm. And the Tramp speaks for the first time, and according to him, doesn't exist after that. And then you've got The Great Dictator, which is a sound movie completely, and he sure looks like the Tramp, but he says it's not the Tramp. Yeah. That's so cool.
That is really cool. I didn't even put that together, that we did 3 different decades, and how well those kind of encapsulate his whole thing. But that's really neat.
It is. He is the GOAT for a reason. The silent film GOAT.
Yeah, I've said this before. I mean, he's like every actor who came after him, is probably owes something, to him and his work.
100p. So when we do these older movie episodes, we can't, because we just said we've each only seen 2 movies from 1925, so we can't do a top of a 1925 list. But I do like to talk about where these movies fall in with all of the other movies we've seen from the decade. So do you mind indulging me? Where do Phantom of the Opera and the Gold Rush fall in terms of all the movies you've seen in the 20s?
All right, so I have seen in the 1920s. I've got 14 films that I have logged in on Letterboxd, and of those 14, I have 7 of them that I have ranked at 5 stars. The Gold Rush being one of those. So I would probably have that ranked amongst the top 5 of the 20s. Amongst those other movies that I have ranked in the top 5 are other ones that we've covered on the podcast, like Safety Last, Sherlock Jr. I know we haven't covered The General yet by Buster Keaton, but that would also be in my top 5 of the 20s, along with probably The Passion of Joan of Arc, and then maybe Sunrise, which we'll cover soon. Sometime. At some point, we'll be covering Sunrise. So that's on there. And then Phantom of the Opera, I have a little bit lower, but would it even crack the top 10? I have it. No, it would fall just below the top 10. I have 10 movies at 4.5 stars or higher, and then right underneath that at 4 stars, I have Phantom and Thief of Baghdad, which we previously covered. So those would be Thief of Baghdad and Phantom are just outside of the top 10.
So mine's pretty similar. I have exactly a top 10, or just a 10. It's not a top 10 because Nosferatu is on this list, and I don't like it. Gold Rush is my number 1 with a bullet, but the other 2 in the top 3 it's like the top 3 of 1920s comedy. It's number 2 Sherlock Jr. With Buster Keaton, and number 3 Safety Last with Harry Lloyd. So like it's very clear I'm a comedy guy when it comes to the 20s. But like right under that is Thief of Baghdad. And then Phantom of the Opera falls is sort of like the middle ground with Passion of Joan of Arc and Prince Ahmed, which is considered by a lot of people to be the first feature-length animated film. It's cutout animation. And that falls in somewhere there. And then below that I have The Ten Commandments, Nosferatu, and then I need to revisit Metropolis because when I watched it the first time, I just did not have the patience for it. But, there's this Kino Lorber extended cut. I just need to give it a shot, like a real honest-to-God shot.
Yeah, that's another one I have ranked pretty highly, but it's been quite a while since I've seen it. So I could be due for a rewatch on that one, too. Another couple that I have that are ranked pretty highly for me is the one we'll visit for 1928 called The Last Command, starring Emil Jannings, and then Wings, the first Best Picture winner. I have that ranked pretty highly, too, which I think actually holds up pretty well today.
Awesome.
One thing that both these movies have in common is that both have been selected by the National Film Preservation Board, so they have been selected for posterity. One other thing, too, interesting about The Gold Rush that we didn't talk about is that it was remade in 1942. Chaplin actually remade it with dialogue and a score, and that version of The Gold Rush was nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Sound and Best Score. It didn't win, but it ended up actually being nominated for Oscars. I guess maybe because the first, obviously, 1925 was before the first Oscar awards. So maybe because the original Gold Rush wouldn't have qualified for any Oscars anyway. Maybe that's why the 42 version was able to qualify. But I found that interesting. I don't wonder how many other I don't know if that's ever happened before. An actual recut version of a movie getting nominated for an Oscar like that, or Oscars like that.
Right. I don't think it's dialogue. I've never seen it, but it's not right. I think it's a narration and sound effects.
Narration. Yeah, there we go. That's what I meant. Yeah.
All right. That does it for 1925. These silent film ones tend to be a little bit shorter, but that's how we started. We used to only do episodes that are this long. We've suffered content creep, just like every other podcast that's ever existed. So how's this for a throwback to those early days?